So, doing a video on this 800 drive clutch. It could be a little different than most videos you've seen on these drive clutches. I've always told you that once you start to get very aggressive pocket wear for your buttons, that these clutches are junk. And I attempted to do something different this last year to try to give these clutches a new lease on life, since the Spider is not available from Polaris. And sometimes there's really nothing wrong with the clutch except that these pockets are worn on the drive side button, and the clutch is rebuildable except for this piece. So what I'm going to show you is a way to maybe get one more rebuild out of your Polaris clutch for almost nothing. What I would suggest is getting some new buttons. Either get them from Polaris or EPI. I can't tell the difference between the two. They're good quality buttons. And here's where it's going to get interesting. Also, make sure the rollers are in good shape, because what we're going to do is use a small amount of JB Weld on the drive side button when we go back together with this to hold that button in place and to stop that drive button from floating out of the pocket into that worn area. So let me get this together a little farther and I'll show you how I'm going to do this. So what I've actually done here on this clutch, there was quite a bit of wear in the tower area where the buttons ride, and I'll show you what I mean here. This area up and down, that grooved area, that's where the buttons ride. And what happens is when these buttons go bad, and what's happening is we're getting dirt excuse me, in behind the drive side button, which is, when you're looking at it like this, it's that button, this one here, on each Spider, the drive side. So power is being applied to that drive side button, and what happens is dirt, belt dust gets in behind there, because there is a small amount of clearance, just a little bit of wiggle room. You get some dirt in behind that button, and pretty soon what happens is some dirt gets packed into this corner here, and pretty soon this button goes from sitting in there straight to sitting in there a little bit crooked like this, and that puts wear, inconsistent wear on your tower like this, and pretty soon you can end up with a groove in that wear side, in that drive side of your tower. Over time, that causes that pocket to elongate or egg shape right in here, and before you know it, your clutch is junk. So to fix this, there is no fix from Polaris. Only fix is a new Spider. What I have done, I mean, you can see like that one got quite a big egg shape there. I've got new buttons. I have shimmed the non-drive side button on this tower, and you may not be able to do this, but I had some shims laying around. This is like a 10,000th shim. I put the shim in on the non-drive side because even if it bumps this button out a little bit, that button never erodes, it never falls out, it never gets worse. If you're going to do any shimming, do it on that side. I've got my new weights in, rollers are in great shape. So what I'm going to do over here on the drive side buttons is use JB Weld. Yes, that is correct. And this is the JB Weld I'm talking about, the 2-part epoxy. Not the quick weld, just standard JB Weld. It has a temperature rating of over 400 degrees, I believe. If you can find the JB Weld high temperature, I think it's rated up to 500 or 600 degrees. That would be even better. But I've used this on a couple of clutches now, put a couple hundred hours on them. The clutches have not been able to produce enough heat to cause any problems so far. Now, if something happens down the road, I'll update this video and say it didn't work out. But for right now, this seems like too good a deal to not let everybody know about it. So what I do is the drive side button, make sure you put new buttons in. Now on the black side here, the side that goes in first, you put a small film of JB Weld on that. Then you put it in and do this on all 3 buttons on the drive side, and go ahead and start turning your spider down. Now some of you are going to say, well, this is a crappy idea. I mean, you JB Weld those buttons in there and then I can't replace them again. Well, that may or may not be true, and I haven't tested it yet to know for sure. But you remember, this side's not glued in. You could take this button out and take that spider off and try to punch that JB welded button out this way, punch the pin out, and that button might pop out. You might be able to redo this again. I don't know. I haven't tested that portion of this yet. This, for me, is a way to combat the main issue of these buttons getting dirt behind them and causing basically a clutch failure. I'm so tired of seeing these clutches junk after so low hours just from dirt inhalation. In fact, I'm doing that on a new clutch right here, out of the box, brand new. I'm gluing in those drive side buttons. So I'm going to go ahead and put a film on these and get them tightened down, and I'll show you how to leave it so it sets. So here's my little piece of I got a little piece of plastic, and I put a small film on there on that button, and that's what I'm going to go in with. So go ahead and thread your spider down and tighten it up with your breaker bar up to about 190 foot-pounds. So now that we've got our buttons in and they're all glued in the way we want them on the drive side bushing or the drive side button, we're going to go ahead and I got this turned down all the way. I'm just going to torque it up to approximately 190 foot-pounds. That's the spec on these. You don't want to get too carried away. There you go. Alright, now we've got our spider torqued down. So now what we want to do is put pressure against this drive side button to compress that button against the back of that pocket and smish that JB Weld out where it needs to be, so that we don't have any clumps back there, so that our button is sitting flat, and any extra is going to be pushed out around that button pocket, which shouldn't be much if you didn't overdo it. So how we're going to do that is we're going to wedge a screwdriver in behind that drive side button, because your drive one's here. We're trying to push the spider this way against this tower. So we're putting a wedge in here, give that a little bump with my palm. We're going to do that. And do that here, and do it on all 3 buttons. You don't need to drive them in there with a hammer, just use your palm. You're just trying to put some tension against that other half of that tower there. Now there you go. That should work good. You're going to want to leave this at least overnight, if not 24 hours. To get a full set on that epoxy, that JB Weld. So don't rush it. Don't throw this thing back in. Be sure you let it at least set overnight in temperature above 60 degrees. That's what it needs to dry. One more thing with this. Now, we just took a worn spider. We glued buttons in. This is a clutch that should have been thrown away, okay? I'm doing this because I'm taking the risk that I think this glue is going to hold these buttons in. That's my risk. If you do this modification, you're taking that risk upon yourself. I'm not going to stand behind it. This is something that's new to me, and it's something I'm sharing and I think is a good, useful tool and idea to get some more life out of these clutches. I'm not going to guarantee that it's safe or practical. So if you decide to do this, you're taking that risk upon yourself. So I wanted to just make that clear. After you let this sit overnight, go ahead and put your cover back on, line your X up, tighten that down with your spring in there. You're ready to go ride after you get it reinstalled. I would keep an eye on it from time to time. Make sure you see how the buttons are wearing. See if you've got any of these buttons starting to work their way out of the pocket. If they do, I would assume that the JB Weld has lost its hold there. So you might need to reinvestigate what's going on. I think that's about all. Thanks for watching the video. Hopefully it saved you some money.